Oh, they're all coming in.
You're going to do an introduction, are you, Jill?
I'll just do very short, if that's okay, just to welcome everyone and to welcome you. And I think just one person to come in, but I think that's it. So we've got quite a nice number, about 25 people. So welcome to everyone to this evening's teaching. Again, we're delighted at Lamrim Wales Buddhist Centre, delighted to have Geshe Graham with us again this evening. Albeit he's in south of France, Nalanda Monastery. So such is the beauty of doing these Zoom sessions, that we can actually be together in this way. And this is set up as a meeting this time. As for those of you who've been with us before, you know we've done them as webinars and meetings. So this is a meeting, so you will be able to see each other when there's questions, which we will have at some point within the teaching. If you want to pose any questions during, please just put those in the chat box, and then Jason, as before, will be able to monitor those, and he will host the question section with Geshe Graham, so that will be a great help. So there's not much for me to say really. I'm just going to hand over to Geshe Graham, and thank you all for coming and being with us, and thank you to Geshe Graham. We're going to record this as well, so Jason's doing that for us, so again we'll have an opportunity to hear that back, and there are people joining us on Facebook as well. Yeah, let's proceed and enjoy the teaching this evening. Thank you, Geshe Graham.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Hello, yes.
So we've got 4 people with me in the room also, joining direct in person. A couple of people are in their rooms. One guy's outside translating into French. So welcome to Nalanda International Broadcasting Service again, and nice to see you all. Plenty of familiar faces, maybe some not quite so familiar, I don't know. Plenty of you anyway. So anything else to say? Don't think so. So we just take refuge then, and then yeah, just refuge. That's the only prayer we need to say. To Buddha, Dharma, and find fellowship. I go for refuge till enlightenment. By my collections, giving, and so forth. May I reach Buddhahood for all being's sake. Sangye chedan sauge chognama. Janchu bada dagni kyapsuchi. Dage jin sauke pesonanke. Drola penche sangye dropashok. Sangye chedan sauge chognama. Janchu bada dagni kyapsuchi. Dage jin sauke pesonanke. Drola penche sangye dropashok. So I'm referring to a few verses that are on a sheet, which I hope Jason has sent round to everybody. Is that right, Jason?
I'm going to add into the chat now, but yes, we will share it through the chat.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've had it before by email, but it's in chat, so whatever you do, download it or have it by the side of your screen or something. So half of the talk is going to be just breezing through those verses, not getting too heavily into it, but just kind of a bit of a light examination of those verses, with hope time for a few questions. And then we'll do a meditation. So about half the time, ideally, will be a meditation. So 1.5 hours altogether. So yeah, a nice sort of meditation, attempting to bring this sort of, this subtle idea of emptiness to mind. See how we can do, see if we can manage it. So not just all listening to me talking, but a bit of a sort of investigation into our own understanding. Yeah, so where are we then? So the first little haiku is by me, so that sort of tries to encapsulate things. Stream of awareness in a handful of dust, renouncement, emergence, sheer luminosity, infinite radiance. Everybody got that? Somewhere the way they can see it? I hope so anyway. That says then, a stream of awareness and a handful of dust. So reminding us of our frailty, a handful of dust. The actual phrase is from Joseph Conrad. He, the English, well, he's a Polish, but writer of well-known English literature, well-known novelist. His phrase was heat of life in a handful of dust. So I've changed that a bit. I've said stream of awareness in a handful of dust. So that's us, with this stream of awareness coming from beginningless time. And then right at the moment, it's just sizzling away in this present handful of dust, which of course is very temporary. That's not come from anywhere long, long ago in terms of, its present configuration. So its little support for our stream of awareness is just this temporary, frail thing that's kind of weak as a handful of dust, really. So time is passing away. So what we're going to do, where are we going to steer this stream of awareness? I might say that I wrote this little reminder when I was staying in Norwich with friends, and I was reading about Julian of Norwich, who you may or may not have heard of, and she was a woman actually. Julian sounds like a man's name, but that was the name of the church she was attached to, where her meditation sort of house was like in the grounds of this church or something. So she got the name of the church. She's not been classed as a saint, but she was actually, a very great writer. And her dates, 1342 to 1416. And she's actually has the credit that the first book in the English language that is known to have been written by a woman that survives with us today is hers. And I think it survived because it's an outstanding book. It's a book of, meditations, book of prayers, a book of, the spiritual life, called Revelations of Divine Love. So I was reading about her in Norwich, and I think it's worth mentioning her because, not that I've read the book in any detail, no, but, you just visit the places that interest you in the city. And perhaps she is a woman for our times because in her lifetime, that's when the Black Death arrived in England. So this is the plague, and so a third of the population of England were killed at that time through this Black Death. And I think she was a child at that time, but it hung around for 40 years. So a lot of her lifetime, there were, scares that it was coming back again. And it did come back again about 4 times. And it is estimated to have killed half the population of Norwich. Norwich was the second biggest city in England at that time because of the wool trade. That was a huge export for Britain, the wool trade. And Norwich was like, prominent in that particular production. So she's a kind of woman for our times in that sense. So it makes you think of, our present virus crisis and puts into a bit of a context. Yes, and she also lived through the Peasants' Revolt. So that was in 1387. So that was another crisis in England. So she lived through troubled times, and she did say I just quote one of her sayings or one of her writings. She said about God. So she's saying that God did not say, right? She says, and her utterance is about what God did not say. So she says, "He said not, thou shalt not be tempested, thou shalt not be travailed, thou shalt not be diseased. But he said, thou shalt not be overcome. So that's a very eloquent remark. He said not, God did not say, thou shalt not be tempested, thou shalt not be travailed, thou shalt not be diseased. But he said, thou shalt not be overcome. So that's the kind of fortitude we've got to have, while mindful of our own frailty. Stream of awareness on a handful of dust. Where do we go from there? Well, we go to renouncement, emergence, sheer luminosity, infinite radiance. So there we are, fizzling away in our consciousness, our bright intelligence in this handful of dust. And probably, you know, just like us, Julian of Norwich, although she may not have accepted previous lives, is going for renouncement, you know, that's renunciation. That's another sort of a Shakespeare. I found that word in Shakespeare, renouncement. So another way of saying renunciation, emergence. So get out of cyclic existence, yeah. Stop agreeing with cyclic existence. Stop trying to find your fancy happiness there. Waste of time. Of course, we do want temporary comforts. We do want relaxation. Yeah? We do want some of the things that samsara gives, of course. So we're not kind of being totally impractical. But you know, where is our heart? You know, where do we keep? You know, what do we keep in our heart as our aspiration? So it's to you know, be done with cyclic existence. You know, to use the brilliant possibilities of our, you know, mental capacity for something, you know, much more worthwhile. You know, let's get on with realizing our full potential. So this is the full potential of our mind is, you know, this, I think that's the sheer luminosity. That's when you do realize, you know, what will take you out of cyclic existence, the wisdom that does free you from suffering. And then infinite radiance, that is when you shine that light out for other people. So it's not just your own luminous mind revealing itself, but it's like, you know, your mind is, your light is shining out for the benefit of others too. So that's a, you know, kind of our sort of a Mahayana purpose, let's say, our sort of Dalai Lama type of Buddhism, that everything we have that's good for us, we have to share with others, try to give it to them. And that's kind of, you know, maybe that's our purpose in life, actually, nothing more than that. Okay, so that's my little kind of opening remark, and then we'll go to Tsongkhapa, praise for dependent relativity. Praise for dependent relativity. So that is Tsongkhapa's very well known, very much admired verses on the final view. So at a certain point, 1398, Tsongkhapa was in meditation on one of his long retreats, and he finally, you know, entered into the ultimate view, which is this, you know, the sheer luminosity of his mind, the realization, which is, you know, the antidote to all, you know, afflicted states of mind which bring suffering around. So that's in 1398. So that is, you know, that's actually during the lifetime of Julian of Norwich, actually. She lived from 1342 to 1416, you see, so they're actually contemporary in time over to a certain extent. Anyway, yes, so let's read his first verse. This is the opening verse of that poem. So he's just realized emptiness after a long, long struggle. It's not been, you know, it doesn't come to him easily. He's some sort of famous saint, but, you know, he put incredible effort into and really going down to the subtlest level. Is not kind of content with anybody else's, you know, presentations until he really, you know, satisfied himself by delving into these, you know, sort of deep texts and meditating, really practicing sort of with sort of great devotion. So he writes, you know, the first verse of his poem, when he's celebrating on the first morning that he's, you know, awakening to the realization of the ultimate view. What does he write? He says, through what you realized and proclaimed, the foremost knower and guide, subduer, I bow to you who so untaught dependent relativity. Dependent relativity, dependent arising. So these are also dependent origination. That's kind of just different ways of translating the basic same Tibetan words. And you know, the Tibetan is translating from Sanskrit. So the Sanskrit gets translated into 3 different ways into Tibetan. So here we have, you know, people's different efforts to translate this word into English. So here we have dependent relativity, dependent arising, same meaning. Yeah, so why doesn't he then, in this first verse, why doesn't Tsongkhapa say yes? So, you know, I'm praising the Buddha for teaching emptiness. That's what it's all about. That's the deep meaning, you know, that's what I'm celebrating, having realized. So that's why the Buddha's the best teacher, because he taught that, you know. He's only able to teach that because he realized that. So he realizes it, and he manages to teach it to a sort of mega audience over the decades, over hundreds of years. That teaching has spread right around the world. So it's a great achievement of the Buddha, you know, in the day when there isn't any Zoom or anything, not even telephones or anything. But he manages to set this wave of, you know, Dharma sort of traveling, you know, through the sea all the way around the world. In the end, you know, after a long time, maybe, but who else could do it? So, you know, great teacher, great guide. So why doesn't he say, well, I'm praising Buddha for teaching emptiness? Well, I think it's because, you know, in Tsongkhapa's time, he was also sort of critical, but he was like, you know, giving a critical assessment of other people's presentations in his time, his place, and going back indeed through, you know, the history of Buddhism in Tibet and India. So, you know, who'd got it right? Who actually had realized emptiness? Who was actually able to present it in a subtle way, you know, which brought out, you know, Buddha's final view, brought out Buddha's final meaning. Buddha taught many different teachings to many different people, you see. So he didn't always teach his subtlest view to everybody. So there's a variety of, you know, ways of interpreting what the Buddha taught. But finally, you know, Tsongkhapa feels he's got there, you know, with this understanding. And him is saying that it's the understanding of emptiness that is totally compatible with dependent relativity, totally compatible with dependent arising. So unless you can present those two, you know, just in total harmony, total sort of, you know, compatibility, then, you know, he's doubting whether you've got through to the final, you know, subtle view of emptiness that he wants to, you know, he says that's what cuts through, that's what will lift you out of suffering, that's what lift you out of the alienation of your own separate selflessness, you know, that obsesses you so much, but, you know, so much of it is a sort of a false overlay. There's nothing really there that you're grasping at. So, dependent relativity or dependent arising is a reasoning, and if you think about that carefully enough, that is the reasoning which will deliver you, you know, into, you know, the point where you can open up to, you know, the subtle emptiness. So he's praising dependent relativity or dependent arising because, you know, he's saying that this is the emptiness you need to realize, not just any emptiness that some other teachers have kind of, you know, imagine is the greatest thing. You know, you've got to realize this one that's so, you know, linked to dependent arising. So it takes a long time to understand those, you know, kind of subtleties. So yeah, so we can't sort of do more than just listen to him at the moment, but we can get a kind of a little bit of an idea of what he's saying, what he's pointing at from verse number 5 of his same poem. What on conditions does rely is empty of inherent being. What way of fine instruction more astounding than this utterance? So that's this is following the Tibetan. You know, the Tibetan poetry is very rhythmic, and it's very sing-song. It's like the rhythm is very strong and very very clear and very obvious. So the way Tibetan poetry works is when our teachers were reciting these verses to us, you know, it's like very much a rhythmic recitation. What on conditions does rely is empty of inherent being. What way of fine instruction more astounding than this utterance? So they're great impacts. And if you really sort of can really get the taste of the meaning and recite them, it's a beautiful presentation. But sometimes it's very cryptic, so they take some kind of time to understand. But I think this one is giving the kernel of meaning of what does it mean, this dependent arising business versus this inherent existent business. So what on conditions does rely? So that means, everything has to be, in truth, in actuality, dependent. Everything is like, just reliant upon other things. So everything is like just at the mercy of causes and conditions. It's at the mercy of circumstances, and everything can be broken down into parts, and everything is like in the end just as it is perceived by the observing mind. So that's a very subtle level of emptiness. It's very difficult to appreciate. Maybe we can understand that things arise in dependence on causes, and things are made up of parts, so they compose the parts, so they rely on parts in the sense that they are made up of parts. But then to say everything is only what it is because it's observed that way by the mind that's observing it, and there's nothing there from the object, the object has no reality of its own, independent of its kind of, its observation by the observing consciousness. So if you can get that, bring that to mind, it's very radical, and it's kind of, well, what does that mean? What are the implications of that? So the implications are very profound, and realizing those implications leads you into that's emptiness. Then, when you realize that nothing does, in fact, have any independent status of any kind of ground reality, that it exists by way of its own power, and it appears to you by way of its own power, not by the way of your interpreting mind. You see, that's the kind of the habitual kind of misappearance and misunderstanding that we have to dislodge. Okay, so that's the core of it. So to grasp at inherent being is to grasp at something to have its own power. It exists by way of its own nature. In the end, there's something there, that's independent of perception, of observation, of discrimination by the mind in the object. Now that object could be a piece of matter. It could be material phenomena, such as anything like made of matter that's obvious, and obviously what we're talking about there. But it can also be your own consciousness, and it can also be abstract phenomena that just categories that the mind makes up for its own satisfaction. So whatever we're talking about, then they're all the same. They're all at that same level of having no inherent reality whatsoever. And when you realize that, that's when you're realizing emptiness. So the need to realize emptiness. So what is the need? Why do we actually have to go through this process of struggling to understand this very subtle kind of, explanation you're trying to give us? Well, another verse from the Praise for Dependent Relativity, the last one. Need to realize emptiness, verse number 2 from the poem. Whatever troubles of this world, their root is ignorance. You taught the insight that reverses it. Dependent relativity. So that's very clearly stated, very simply stated, that all the problems in the world are actually coming from this grasping at inherent existence. So, to get to the idea of what inherent existence, to sort of refute it, the antidote that gets rid of the ignorance, you need the wisdom. So the wisdom is a wisdom realizing emptiness, and that comes from, understanding dependent relativity properly. So that's our challenge. To say how that ignorance is responsible for all that, for all our problems, that's another question. You see, so. Why is it that all our suffering is coming from this ignorance? So that needs some explaining. See, so that's not something that's obvious. It may. The more and more I've studied it, the more I've begun to feel that yes, it's right. It's not like realized anything, but you know, it just, as time has gone on, it seems that yes, you know, that there's some real meaning there. There's some really that's convincing. Anyway, let's see what we can get by way of a bit of explanation of that. So now we're going to a verse from the 3 principal aspects of the path. So this is again by Tsongkhapa. So another of his poems. I see I've misspelled principle. Huh. Principle. Yeah, it's wrong. Principle. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The 3 principal aspects of the path. So another of Tsongkhapa's short works of verse. So my translation of verse number 3 is: if pure renunciation's lacking, then no way to quiet the eager seeking for the ocean of existence, pleasure fruits, and craving for existence. That's what keeps embodied beings continually chained. So then, search out renunciation first. Yeah, so in this verse, he's concerned that we should develop renunciation, but he's giving a bit of a description of, you know, what our hang-ups are, you see. So he's saying that the eager seeking for the ocean of existence as pleasure fruits is, you know, that's kind of very, that's a great obstruction for us. It's a great hindrance that we should be doing that. So the pleasure fruits, it seems like a bit of a mixture, doesn't it? That you've got an ocean of existence producing pleasure fruits. You think, well, fruit should come from trees, not from oceans. So what's going on? Why are we using fruits? But I think it works. I think it's powerful. You know, like the tasting the fruits is like, you know, there's that line by Keats that talks about bursting joy's grape against your palate fine. Yeah? It's a poem by Keats, an English poet. It's like, you know, you have this grape in your mouth and you just burst the grape against your palate with your tongue or something. And you just suck up the nectar. Which is a great one for, you know, a great description of, you know, how we try to enjoy ourselves in cyclic existence. Or is it? I don't know. So, but it's like an ocean. Cyclic existence is like an ocean because it's like kind of endless. It's like the waves are bashing us one way, then they bash us another way, then they bash us another way, then we drown in the waves, and then we get reborn in a little boat. You know, so that's also a very powerful kind of metaphor. They put the boat together. It's a good contrast, I think. And also, you know, French, we're in France here, so the fruit de mer, that's seafood. So they do actually use the word fruit de mer, the fruit of the sea. Actually, that's a common way of referring to seafood in France. So it's, that's okay, you see. Anyway, so, you know, it's our compulsive, you know, our eager, our compulsive, our addiction to, you know, where are we going to find happiness? We're going to find it in samsara. We're going to find it by doing worldly things, which gives us worldly pleasures. And if we don't know any better, most people have never heard of any alternative. So, you know, why not? So, yeah, of course. So, anyway, that's samsara. That's Tsongkhapa's coming at, you know, that and criticizing it, so putting it down. So you won't find happiness like that. Okay, you find temporary happiness maybe if you are lucky, and we are lucky because we are born in this sort of, you know, whatever you call it, you know, creamy bourgeois layer, right, of global society, the Western, you know, European middle class, whatever it is, you know, kind of a trip we've got going, means that we are, you know, we are in the creamy layer of society. So, you know, think of all those creatures, just the animals, you know, living in kind of, you know, slave state. How many billions of animals are killed every year for human consumption and so on, you know, just raised in horrible conditions. So we are the ones who haven't got the bit of leisure, you know. So, and are we just going to be, you know, just like animals, you know, craving the pleasures of psychic existence and doing, you know, not aiming for anything better than that, you know. So, Tsongkhapa says, and craving for existence, that's what keeps embodied beings continually chained. So it's that very desire, that's kind of, you know, the impulse that lasts beyond, you know, the death state. So our mind is so, you know, deeply, like, whatever, soaked, or, you know, what do they call it? Yeah, soaked in that desire, or, you know, steeped in that desire, so that, our minds are totally addicted to cyclic existence's pleasures, even though, however often we grasp at them, they always fall apart on us. Or if we're successful in getting, they're all short term. We've got a perfect human rebirth, so it's the perfect human rebirth, but still, it's just a heap of dust. It's just a heap of dust that's going to crumble away, like sand running through your fingers. So that's your life is just running away now. So you've got the perfect human rebirth. What does it mean? You're just on your way out. You're just getting nearer to your death all the time. Your precious energy of your life just sort of disappearing away. So our consciousness, it's like fizzling away. I said earlier on, didn't I? Our consciousness is fizzling away in this handful of dust. Stream of awareness is just fizzling away. But if you use a word like fizzling, it makes you think of fireworks. So that's just it. Our consciousness is just like a firework. It's got all these bright, kind of, dazzly, kind of showy, sort of, aspects. I mean, what finer thing is there in the universe other than, the bright, intelligent consciousness which we've got, Homo sapiens, Femina sapienta. Yeah, so we're the ones, but it's just like a firework, it's sizzling away, all bright and brilliant, but like a firework, it just lasts for about three seconds or 3 minutes or something, and all these sort of crackles and pops and beautiful shows of dazzling light, and then it's gone, and this darkness returns. You spent all that money for 3 seconds of pleasure. Yes. So we really have to ask ourselves, do we really want to use our consciousness just for, just the distractions of psychic existence, the pleasant taste of, a nice steak and all that. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So better keep going. So how do we get out of this? What's, what is the path we take if we are prepared to follow the Buddha's direction then? Well, the path of progress. This is verse number 5. The wisdom stanzas is from chapter number 18. I think on your paper it might say verse number 17, chapter number 17, but it's actually chapter number 18. Verse number 5. From karma and affliction's end, there's freedom. They from false thoughts, and false thoughts from fabrications come. Through voidness, fabrications cease. So that's by Nagarjuna. It's not by Tsongkhapa. So you can see how Nagarjuna, is providing a model for Tsongkhapa. His verses, Tsongkhapa's verses, very often like Nagarjuna's. Nagarjuna was very much the model. It's very much is Nagarjuna's philosophy that Tsongkhapa relied on to sort of get through to his deep insights. Of all the Buddhist, classic masters who followed on from the Buddha and expanded people's understanding of the teachings, Nagarjuna was the one who had the correct understanding according to Tsongkhapa, and he's very persuasive. So karma, that's what's driving, one of the driving forces of cyclic existence. Even if we do good karma, and if we do nice, kind things, but if we just have the samsaric mindset, all that does is ripen up into temporary happiness within cyclic existence, which we can experience, we can taste, but then it just dies away from us. So that's all the good karma we're able to connect to produce if we are just doing our good karma with a worldly mindset. It only ripens up within cyclic existence. It only gives us those temporary pleasures, which as soon as we've sort of grasped them, then they sort of slip through our fingers. And nothing lasts for very long. And of course, our negative karma, then yes, we've got plenty of that waiting to ripen up. So this will really push us down. That really will bring us suffering. And the suffering that we have now, somebody like me anyway, and of course I can't speak for everybody. I've been very lucky in this life so far, but we don't have to think of just us and the animal realms, but all the other possibilities within the realm of samsara. So there's some very ugly, very painful rebirths, that we can take. So this is our karma rightening up. That's where it will take us, unless we can purify it quickly. The best way to purify it, realizing emptiness. But if we can bring that, that karma, stop creating that karma, purify the karma we've got, and how do we create the karma? Through these, addictive, sort of poisonous types of minds, as sort of the toxic minds. So we've talked about the ignorance grasping at inherent existence. But then what does that lead to? That leads to attachment, craving, and that leads to anger and hostility and aggression. Yeah, so those are the three poisons. So that's where, those are the afflictions that we've got to sort of, erase from our minds. And then we'll have freedom from cyclic existence. Then we'll have freedom from suffering. That's the message. So where do we get, the afflictions, that's like these false thoughts, you see. Grasping the thing to inherently exist. Grasping at the object that we crave for, or the object we feel, frustration and anger towards, grasping at that in the wrong way, grasping it to inherently exist when it doesn't. This is a false thought. But why do we think like that? Well, the very things that we are grasping at appear to us to inherently exist. Our ignorance is so deep. It's not like something that we just come up with through, sort of a training or a wrong teaching when we're children. It's like even to animals who've never had any sort of, sort of misleading teachings about different philosophies. To any creature, even a little baby who's not had any, propaganda thrown at it by parents sort of teaching it the way to look at the world, they grasp at things to inherently exist. So it's a very deep-rooted, innate kind of misappearance, which then leads us, just to, accept that what appears to us is the way it appears, which is, what we've got to sort of try and be a bit like kind of objective about, get it in perspective, not just be carried away by those appearances, but stand back, breathe deeply. So is it really the way I'm looking at it? Let's take a more mature approach. But this is it, thinking the object is really like that, really the way it appears, as if existing by way of its own power. This is the kind of this is the kind of the falseness that we've got to challenge. And it can be challenged, it's like, if you understand dependent arising, it challenges that very well. But instinctively, we go for the wrong view. But if we think about it carefully, use our reasoning power the way the Buddha is suggesting, then we can start to see that the way things are is the way we're interpreting them, rather than the way they are by way of their own power. And as an example of that, then think of whatever you're into, whatever really pleases you in the way of a taste. What's your nectar? I mean, take that literally as something you actually would taste and pleases you, like your taste consciousness. But what is the nectar? What turns you on in a pleasure object? What really do you fancy? What really makes you think, wow, I really want some of that. That's what I like to experience. Okay, so you think of that. Then you throw that. Then you show that. You show that to, say, a fly or a frog, right? Yeah. So what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh, what's that? What's that funny smell around here? Who wants that? What turns us on is not going to turn them on. So think about that. The fly. What's the fly thinking? So why can't they give me a piece of rotten meat? That's what I really love, isn't it? There's the blowflies. There's three types of blowflies, aren't there? There's one that love to lay their eggs in rotten meat that's dead. The corpse is rotten meat of a corpse. There are those who like to lay their eggs in wounds, so it's a living flesh of an actual animal that's got a wound on it. And so they go for that. That's where they want to lay their eggs. And there are those blowflies which like to lay their eggs in fresh excrement. And human excrement is very fine. They love it. And there's the females, they like to eat it probably all the time, but that's where they like to lay their eggs, because they're grubs, they're maggots, so they're gonna crawl out of their little eggs that they lay. That's what they love to eat. So you can see how it's it's completely different. What they think's nice and what we think's like is completely different. And then you think of that frog. You show what you think of as nectar in this world of a frog, and What he's thinking about is the male frog is, oh, there's that lady frog living on the other side of the pond, you know. Oh, can't wait till the breeding season, you know. It's only like in a month, another month, and then we'll be in the breeding season, and she'll be getting all excited, you know. So that's what he's thinking about. We think, oh, the frog, oh, pretty ugly creature, you know, toad or something like that. Doesn't turn us on, but the male frog is like, you know, when he sees the female one, he's, oh, when's the breeding season going to come around? Oh, only another month to wait. You see, so all I'm saying with all this sort of fancy talk is, you know, what's pleasurable to us is only pleasurable because of our own mind's inclinations and nothing more. And exactly what's pleasurable to the fly, that's pleasurable because he's built that way, you know. The fly's built, or the she, you know, she's pregnant, she wants to lay her eggs. You know, that's her inclinations. It's where her mind is coming from, decides whether that object is worth having and it's precious or not. So exactly what we think is useless and horrible and want to get rid of, she thinks so precious and wonderful. So it really all comes down to, you know, the way you're looking at things. And when we realize that, we can really calm down. It's not, oh, those things that we need, you know, that seem so important to us, you know, but it's just like, you know, it's a compulsion of our own mind that are doing it. Of course we need food. Of course we need relaxation. Of course we need comfort. I'm not saying that. But when you get attached, you know, that's when the negative side of your, you know, desire comes out, and you are trying to sort of grasp at things, which, you know, and then you're doing the negative actions or whatever it is. Covetousness and greed is leading to you to steal or take advantage. You know, I must have my food that I like. You know, whether it means there's 100 billion animals are getting slaughtered, you know, over my lifetime just for human food and so forth. So you see what I mean? So then, but to realize that there's nothing in reality which makes the object what it is from its own side at all, then you're realizing voidness. So don't ask, you know, when we don't ask what voidness is, when we don't ask about ultimate reality, there's plenty to be getting on with. There's plenty of objects here, and there's plenty of dealing to be done. This is beneficial, and that's not beneficial. I'm not denying that, you know. Yeah, and this is very toxic for human beings. This one is very hygienic for us and sensible. So we make those discriminations of good and bad. That's, oh yes, even on the surface level. But when you get out to ultimate level, then you see that all those divisions are just, you know, presentations of your own mind to itself, and you think they're out there on the object, but there's not even any separation of subject and object in reality. That's another just carve up that your mind is making. Yeah. Oh, my separateness from the rest of the world. That's also, you know, just totally provisional at the kind of surface level. Ultimately, there's only voidness. Ultimately, you ask what's there really there from its own side. There's only voidness, sheer absence of anything that has any reality of its own. Okay, and you think, oh, that's a bit frightening. Oh, that's a bit, you know, nihilistic or something. But no, that's freedom. Enjoy that emptiness. You don't need to cling to, you know, some other figure to hang on to. The emptiness is just your release. You know, it's like now I understand why everything gets into the mess it gets into, and now I understand how to kind of, you know, just be balanced about it. So celebrate it. That's what Tsongkhapa's doing in his poem. So praise for dependent relativity. Celebrate that. Then you can have transformation. Our dependent arising makes sense. Cause gives rise to effect. Effect follows from cause. Just a pure understanding of that. You know, then your mind's your heart's at rest. Your mind's at peace, and you really start to be able to sort of benefit others by, you know, that sense of sort of selflessness is like, you know, coming through to you at last. Anyway, so I better stop because I've got some other verses we could go to, but so has anybody got any questions? What do you think, Jason?
There's none come through the chat at the moment, but people can easily turn their microphones on a meeting format like this, if anyone's got any questions.
Good. Well, we can get on with the meditation. So I'm going to give some nice without it being so rushed, you know, at the end of the talk, we just have a more kind of you know, sort of leisurely meditation, let's say. So what I'm trying to do in the meditation is to show, you know, this idea that, you know, how can everything just be somehow like you know, imputed by the mind? That's how our, you know, middle way philosophers describe it in Tibetan. You know, everything is just merely imputed by the mind, without any shred of self-existence by way of, you know, the object's own sight. So how can that be true? You know, wouldn't that ruin everything? You know, if everything is just like how we imagine it, and just you know, so definitely in the case of things being pleasant or unpleasant, then it's not hard to see how subjective it is. You know, like the fly likes the rotten meat because that's the perfect place for her to lay her eggs. But for us, rotten meat is something we just want to throw out because of the bad smell, and you know, it's repulsive. So that's just, you know, that's obviously from your subjective where you're coming from. But can everything be like that? Well, this meditation is a kind of a little bit of an attempt to show that yes, it can. So I hope we can follow. So let's, shall we just go to the meditation mode then? Just slow down a bit and bring our consciousness as sort of, you know, more within, and just maybe breathe a bit from the from sort of lower down from our abdomen. Keep our back straight. Just take a few breaths, just concentrating on the breath going in and out, just to try and bring our minds within, give it a bit of balance, refresh it a bit. Again, just good to think a little bit about the 3 jewels of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. So they're kind of where we're drawing our inspiration from. So we're trying to experiment with Dharma investigation. So may the Buddhas bless us. They're all around us. They want nothing more than we should get interested in the Dharma. So they're delighted with our efforts. We're all mature people, so we've seen the troubles of samsara in the human and animal realms on this planet. So how much more there may be, different realms. The whole spectrum of suffering and happiness must be there in samsara somewhere. So beings going through, you know, terrible tortures, desperate situations. So it's really a place to be very wary of, samsara. It's not something we can walk around in as if it's some sort of pleasure park where everything's safe and comfortable. So we want the Buddha's help now. Please guide us. Please show us the way to undo the ties. Please show us the way to profound emptiness, not just for ourselves, but so that we can be the best we can be for all the beings that we can possibly reach out to. Let me become such a wonderful being as a Buddha. So with the Buddha's blessings and encouragement then, the Buddha and the Sangha also. So let us imagine, now we're in our, just like on the meditation, there's a meditation on the second page of your sheet there. So I'm just going through the points on the meditation on the second page, backside. So let's imagine then we are looking out from a comfortable seat with a couple of friends, maybe across a valley to the hillside beyond, or maybe across a lake. It could be in Scotland looking across Loch Lomond, or could be in the Pyrenees and the Landa retreat cabin in the Pyrenees, looking out across a valley to those mountains that separate France from Spain. So at the top we have the snowy tips, the snowy peaks, then we have the rocky slopes, then we have the grassy alpine meadow slopes, then below that we have the very luxurious greenery, at least on the French side. So there's a grand luxurious growth there, all the way down to the bottom of the valley where the river's flowing. So concentrating on that lower section then, where all this beautiful, luxurious green growth is. So you turn to your friend on your right, who's sitting, looking at the same view as you, and you say, there, what do you see? So this friend says, oh, I see a beautiful forest there, a lovely forest. That's a great forest. So then you turn to the person on your left, your other friend, and you say to them, then, okay, so what do you see? So that friend, he says, oh well, I see lots of beautiful trees. What a wonderful show of so many trees of different kinds, tree after tree after tree, so many trees. I've never seen so many trees. In one sort of space. How marvelous, how wonderful, so many trees. Okay. So one person says, oh, beautiful forest, a forest. And the other person is saying, oh, many trees, many beautiful trees. So now we want to go a bit deeper then. So we're doing this ultimate investigation now then. So you ask the question, so what's really there then? What's really there? In that sense, it means what's there regardless of who's looking at it, regardless of the tastes of the person or whatever the angle, the sort of opinions or something of the person. What's really there on the opposite side, across the lake or something. So you have to remember then that at this point that one and many, we can say they're contradictory. So that something can't be both, right? That's the idea of contradictory here. There's nothing that can be both if two things are contradictory. You know, like if a person is you know, tall and thin, or the body is tall and thin, then they won't be short and fat, you know. So if this paper is coloured all black, then it won't be white. If all the total surface of the paper is black, then it won't be white. Anybody who is claiming that it's white is just completely, you know, completely wrong consciousness, right? So like that, completely contradictory. So, you know, it's just logical position, isn't it? It's either X or it's not X. It can't be both X and non-X. Just that kind of thing. So that's not so complicated. A bit of philosophy maybe, but it's, everybody understands that. And it works out in our language too, you know. So here we're contrasting one and many. So if you say like one, there's one policeman on the bridge. So that's one. Okay, that's easy enough, one. But then if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or, you know, 50 policemen on the bridge, then you're going to say, oh, 2 people, there's two policemen are on the bridge, or something like 3 policemen are on the bridge. 50 policemen are on the bridge now. So we're using a different verb, right? So that tells us like one or more than one, which I'm saying is many here. Anything more than one is many, right? So 2, 3, 50, a million, that's all many. So whatever you're looking at has got to be, you know, you'd think it's got to be either a single thing, like one policeman, or it's got to be, you know, many, like, you know, 50 policemen. So you wouldn't really expect something that could be both one and many, just like a piece of paper can't be both black and white at the same time. You know, the same surface of the paper can't be black and white. So just bear that in mind. So then we ask a question, what's really there then? So what we're going to say, is there one forest that's real? And the breaking it up into many trees is like just something the mind is doing, you know, just because the mind is like sort of, you know, it doesn't see the oneness, but it falls into the trap of thinking of manyness, which is a mistake. Or it could be like the many are real, but the one, you know, the one forest is just like pasted over the many trees, like just, it's the many trees that are real, and the one forest is like just a way of, you know, sort of accumulating the trees together and lumping them together. Just, you know, a sort of mental kind of, you know, kind of a projection onto the many. So which is it going to be? Is either of those two any use? So there are those Hindu philosophers, you know, non-Buddhist, who do talk about oneness very seriously, don't they? We're all one. We're all one in Brahma. We're all Brahma. You know, we're all one. Oneness. And they mean that to sort of somehow quite literally. I mean, I'm not sort of pretending to know really what their philosophy is like. And of course, there are many different variety, great creative sort of variety of views within that, you know, the non-Buddhist Indian, what we now call Hindu sort of spectrum of views. But you do get this this sense of, you know, oneness. So we see each other as separate from each other. But that's where the ignorance is coming in. That's the false sort of, you know, breaking up of the oneness. And that's the illusion we're creating. instead of thinking I am me and you are you, we should be thinking I am you and you are me. So getting rid of those false discriminations of this, we're actually all this one in Brahma. So we're all, the highest realization is of unity. So it's like the one forest seems to be real, and the many trees are like you're breaking up this oneness. And then seeing separateness between things where there really is no separateness. Or perhaps we should go the other way, which is what some Buddhists do. This isn't the middle way view, but it's definitely a Buddhist view, which is one Buddhist view that Nagarjuna was concerned to criticize. But they're taking a different approach. They're saying it's the many that are real. So like you've got many aggregates, they're the real thing, the parts. And it's the compulsion of the mind, or the convenience of the mind, so that you sort of posit a one, a person on top of the aggregate, yeah? Where you posit the forest on top of the trees, and then you start to think that the forest and the tree is real. The forest is sort of really there, and that the person is sort of somehow a real person, sort of has got some sort of independence and control over the aggregate, some sort of, instead of seeing the person as just merely kind of posited there by the mind, you start to think of this really there, sort of going on to this business of, grasping at a self in their way. But the aggregates are real, they're substantial, they're substance, they are, they're sort of, the pure mind. Mind is something you can talk about as really there, and not form, matter. But it's just that the person you posit independence upon, this particular collection of matter, this particular stream of consciousness, that's me, and then sort of now the person somehow starts to have this sort of feeling the person himself is some sort of substantial independent being, instead of just merely posited on the aggregate. But you can see how in this view, then it would be the trees that are really there. And then the forest is like just sort of a kind of something that's posited over the trees, as a sort of way of referring to them all the trees together conveniently. But as soon as you look for one forest, all you're going to find is just the many trees, right? Where's the forest amongst the trees? Well, you can't find it. So yes, so the forest is coming from the side of the mind. And it's the trees that are there in reality. Something like that. Is that a good way to look at it? So when we're talking about what's really there, then it seems like there has to be one or the other, because one and many are contradictory after all. Can't be both from the side of the object. One and many contradictory. It's like, black and white. Or is it, somebody might have come to a more, a third possibility by now. We're used to thinking about things being, merely imputed and not having any reality of their own. Or at least, some people have been practicing Buddhism for some time. They've studied these things and they're familiar. So they say, oh, well, if the person wants to see what's over there on the other side of the valley, as many trees, that's perfectly okay. That's quite a valid way to interpret the information that he's getting from his sense consciousnesses. That variety of colors and shapes that's appearing to his eyes. Oh yes, that's many trees there. But the person who's thinking of it as one forest, it's the same display of color and shape to that person's eye consciousness. But just from the different different perspective of his mind at that moment, different what occurs to him at that moment, then he says, oh, well, that's one nice forest, one beautiful forest. So it's up to the person who's doing the looking. It's how they interpret the situation, how they want to see it, how they want to categorize it with their conceptual minds. So it being one or many, then it's not like it's one or many from its own side. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be inherently one or many. It just that's the way the person's coming at it. And if both are valid, in the sense that he's perfectly right to say there is one forest there. It's perfectly correct to say there are many trees. That we wouldn't say that one of those is a wrong consciousness and one of those is a correct consciousness. We'd have to allow that they're both correct consciousness. But you see, the one or many that are there for them, it's not from the side of the object. It's from the side of their interpreting preferences. And more than that, if we now think to ourselves, yes, in the ordinary world, just ordinary surface level, if it's neither one nor many, then it doesn't exist. So think about that one. If it exists in this world, whatever it is, whatever you're looking at, it has to be either one or many. So not only are one or many contradictory, but everything in the world fits into one of those two categories. Right, so it's a sort of a universal sort of division into two. So you say, one potato, although we know that goes in the one category. But then we say many flowers. Well, okay, that's in the many category. 6 policemen. Oh, that's many. 1 policeman. Oh, that's one. So on the ordinary, conventional way of dealing with the world, in correct consciousness, whatever you pick out, it will be in either the one category or the many category. And nothing left over. So now the next thing to think is this: well, if that's true, okay, now we're talking about this inherent type of existence now, existence from the object's own side. So if it's inherently existent, it would have to be inherently one or inherently many, just in the same way. If it exists, it has to be one or many. So if it inherently exists, by way of its own power, it would have to exist as inherently one or inherently many. It would have to be that from its own side. It'd have to be just be one thing on its own, or it'd have to be, lots of things, or at least two or three, just by way of its own power. But in the case of what we're just looking at, this view across the valley, or across the lake, the luxuriant greenery over there, we just agreed that it's not inherently one, it's not inherently many. If it were inherently one, then that guy who's seeing many trees, he'd have to be having a wrong consciousness, wouldn't he? He's seeing many and there's only one there, so he's seeing something wrong. But that's not really very convincing, is it? Or if it were inherently many by way of its own power from its own side, then the guy seeing many trees would be seeing, what's really there. And the person seeing one forest would have to admit he's seeing something that he's just, positing there, that he's sort of, applying it there from his own mind. Sort of, it's not actually there. So again, that would be kind of a wrong concept, really. He's sort of creating a fiction to suit himself. But we think we can agree that, it's hard to say that either of those people are wrong. Both of them have a, valid kind of opinion. Oh, it's many trees, or it's one forest. Or, sure. Can't disagree with that. So, but we have to admit that the many and the one that they're seeing are not from the side of the object. So the object itself hasn't got the property of being one or many. So if it's not inherently one or inherently many from its own side, then it can't inherently exist at all. To inherently exist, it's got to be inherently one or inherently many. And we've got to admit there is neither of those. It's not inherently one, it's not inherently many. So it's not inherently existent at all. So that's getting to the the reality of what's actually there then. There's nothing there that inherently exists. So that's the voidness we are talking about. So if you ask what's really there from its own side, what's there in reality, independent of the observer, independence of my interfering mind, then nothing at all, and that's voidness. Sheer absence of inherent existence, and that's the wonderful way the world is. So any appearance of inherent existence subsides. That's just a false appearance. No need to believe in that anymore. But we're asking, what is there really there from its own side? So the forest subsides. That's not there from its own side. That requires the participation of the consciousness prepared to see it there. The many trees disappear because they are, that somehow has to be a construct constructed by the mind looking at the scene. So they're not there in reality. The appearance of the trees and the forest, that subsides. And the idea that there is an object out there at all cut off from the subject, that must subside too. That's also, something that's just product of the mind's interpreting strategy. If you look for that, you'll never find it. Nothing from the object's own side. So there's nothing out there that's cut off and distant from the subject that is separate from it. And the subject is the same. When we analyze our own selves, we come to the same conclusion. There's one whole depending on many parts and many aggregates. There's many aggregates. How would the aggregates be there if they weren't part of a whole? How would you be able to wave your arm about if it wasn't connected to, a digestive system, a respiratory system, nerve endings that go all the way up to the brain and the mind deciding you want to wave your arm. So there's no parts without the whole. There's no kind of, living arm without it being connected to a whole person. So the parts depend on the whole depends upon the parts. So there's nothing there that's there by way of its own reality. So there's no subject, no object in reality. So let's gaze on reality now. So all those, compartmentalizations of our mind can just, dissolve. See, at last, now I'm seeing that sort of, magical emptiness that shows me this is reality. So you can apply the reasoning about the forest and the trees to your own self too. Normally we think of ourselves as one person, one thing, but just as often, or fairly frequently, we think of ourselves, this part of my body, this part of my digestive system, or this mind, or this feeling I'm having right now. So we easily break ourselves down into many parts. What is there in reality? Are really one from our own side? Or really many from our own side? So it turns out we just like the forest and the trees. We can see ourselves as one person. Or we can look down at ourselves and say, oh, just many parts all cooperating together. Both views are correct. So from our own side, or from the side of the object, neither, because to one consciousness we appear as one, to another consciousness we appear by many parts. So both those consciousnesses are valid. So one or many business is purely like, in the perspective of the mind observing it. And if we're not inherently one or inherently many, then we don't inherently exist at all. There's no third possibility. So again, we turn to, that silence of the void where all these discriminations are just able to subside. So when it comes to what exists from the side of the object, all there is voidness, that all. And that's, that's the truth, that's reality. So everything that we meet in life, everything we deal with, internal, external, all arise from their causes and conditions, arise, last and pass away. And nothing has any own reality, any special privileged status as really being there, independent of the mind observing it. It's impossible. Everything is just connected to everything else. Everything is like connected at least to its causes. The parts determine what the whole is like. The whole is there because the parts are there. Parts are there because there is a whole that they're part of. Causes are identified as causes because they give rise to effect. So this, when you're back in the world of, not thinking about the ultimate side, and everything's working perfectly, just as it has to be. Stream of awareness goes on. handful of dust falls apart. We're aware now, that these things don't have that huge objective solidity that we thought they have, that we can grasp at them as giving us pleasure, grasp at them as being horrible and something we have to get emotionally kind of negative about. So we just look at the last verses on the sheet now in conclusion, underneath the meditation. So another verse from the fundamental wisdom stanzas, chapter 7. Just like a magic show, a dream, just like a city of Gandharvas, just so a rising was described, so lasting and destruction so. So the city of Gandharvas is like a traditional sort of a mirage in the desert for people in India, ancient India. When they saw the sort of castles in the air of a mirage, they says that's the city of the celestial musicians. So it's just an appearance to the mind, like a magic show or a dream that has no substance or reality. So we should see a waking reality like that too. It appears in one way, but exists in another. The elephant in a dream appears to be a real elephant, but it's not a real elephant, it's just a dream elephant. So things arise, they last, and they pass away, just according to the collection of causes and conditions. That's just how it has to be. And then the last verse from the 3 principal aspects of the path, which again I've spelled wrongly. Verse number 6. So this is reminding us, we develop the sheer luminosity of our mind, but we also want to develop the infinite radiance, that whatever goodness we can come up with, insight or wisdom, it's for everybody else. It's for all others. We try to share it. So this is developing bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened for the sake of all beings. So we develop our good qualities in order to be helpful to others. So this is the final thought for this evening. Yet if renunciation's not sustained by pure mind generation, it will not become a cause of the marvelous delights of unsurpassed enlightenment. So then the sensible will generate the mind supreme set on enlightenment. So that is the mind generation, the mind that is has the aspiration, spontaneous and deep aspiration to become enlightened, to become a Buddha, for the sake of all other sentient beings. So we dedicate the merits of our little session in that direction. Okay then, that's all we have time for. Nice to be with you all. Have a nice deep meditation. Okay guys, good night. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Geshe Graham. That was beautiful. The really inspiring teaching and the most beautiful meditation. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Good night then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next time.
Thank you.